You're listening to the Black Eagles podcast with Sinan and Kaan Bayazit.
Ahmet Dursun Sergen aldı. Sergen Bülent yan yana. Sergen Bülent. Sergen. Orada Tümer var. Tümer'e doğru aksın kaybetti. Tümer topu aldı. Sergen aldı. Gol! Gol! Sergen attı. Sergen attı. Şampiyonluk geldi. Sergen attı. Şampiyonluk geldi.
İbrahim'in pası. Yuma. Şimdi Ahmet. İkinci gole gidiyor Beşiktaş. Ahmet.
Welcome back, everybody. Episode 34 of the Black Eagles podcast. I am your host, Sinan, live and direct from New York City. And as you know, today is not a typical episode. We have a very special episode today as we preview this week's European competition, Malmö of Sweden. And it's an exciting match. Now, before I cut to the chase, I should give you all the precursor, the warning, if you will. Thursday, October 4th, Malmö will be hosting our club, Beşiktaş, the club for whom this podcast is dedicated. But yeah, it's going to be a late match. The match is going to be on at 3 p.m. here in New York City. For those of you in Istanbul, this match is going to be on at 10 p.m. I think that's 9 p.m. Locally in Sweden, I assume. So I'm not sure what the lateness is there for. But anyway, there you have it. It's going to be a late match on Thursday. So be prepared for that. You know, drink your coffee, if you will. You have the requisite energy. Just make sure you're not sleeping on the match and you're not, half-assing it in terms of your motivation levels, your excitement. The club needs you. As always, needs all of us. But anyway, let's not spend too much time on technicalities like that because we've got a great episode and I don't want to waste too much time. We've got some great guests. Kaan, in his magnanimity, if you will, has once again reached out into the ether and pulled in two fantastic, well-informed guests. First of all, he is speaking with Alexandra Jonson, very well known in Sweden, analyst, I suppose. She was in charge of the national team Twitter account, giving the news, doing interviews for FIFA in that same role that Sonia was in for Serbia. So yeah, she's at the top of her game, and Kaan got a lot of great info out of her. And then, as promised, we've also got, and this is for our After the Beep segment, another expert, another Swedish lady, if you will. But the ladies have been holding it up for us, I'll be honest. Some of our best analysis has come from Sonia Nikčević, so and this episode is also fantastic. So I hope you all enjoy. So yeah, nothing but the best. So as always, we're going to keep you guys posted on everything. We're going to keep you guys the most informed section of the Beşiktaş fan base, as we're proud to do. And yeah, without further ado, let me just cut right to the chase. Kaan with Alexandra Jonson. Enjoy.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Black Eagles podcast. In our series of previewing Beşiktaş's Europa League opponents, today we're covering Malmö. And not with our announced guest, JohannaFranden, because unfortunately she couldn't be with us. But thanks to Sonia Nikčević, who saves us again, we have something even better. We have Alexandra Jonson, who's currently in Spain covering the more northern teams in La Liga. But she is also a very big Malmö fan, and she was at the World Cup in Russia covering the Swedish national team. Alexandra, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So, Alexandra, what are you doing in Spain? How did you end up in Spain exactly?
Well, as I normally say, the answer to every question is Henrik Larsson. So when Henrik Larsson was my childhood hero, as for, I guess, many Swedish football fans, and when he signed for Barcelona, I started to watch La Liga, and then I kind of got stuck with La Liga, and I just love the way Spanish football is, the passion, how it becomes more than football with the people, the stories around the football. And then I moved to Barcelona when I was 19 and started studying Spanish and got stuck in Barcelona for 3 years. And during those years, I kind of went from being a Barca fan to being a La Liga fan and more interested about the rest of La Liga and the rest of Spain. And after that, when I went back to Sweden, I started traveling a lot to the northern Spain, and especially here to Vigo, where I live now, because John Guidetti was playing here, who was the only Swedish player in La Liga. So for work purposes, it was the best place to go to do stories for Swedish papers, and just really started loving Spain and northern parts of Spain and Spanish football in general, and that's kind of how I got stuck here.
So did you also have this passion for Scottish football at some point then in your life?
Both yes and no. The problem was when he was playing for Celtic, you couldn't really watch. I might be wrong, but this is how I remember it. You couldn't watch the Scottish League in Sweden, or we didn't have the channels to watch it at least. So I never really watched him play for Celtic. I just watched him play for the national team. But I did, as soon as YouTube was around, I did YouTube a lot of Celtic videos. I think there's nothing I searched more for than Henrik Larsson Celtic on YouTube during those years. So I always had like a special thing for Celtic, even though I never really watched Celtic play any football matches because I couldn't watch it. I did see Celtic. I always had on my bucket list I had to go to Celtic Park, and I did do it when Malmö played against them in the Champions League qualifiers a few years ago. And I went there as a Malmö fan. Which was quite special because the Malmö fans hate Henrik Larsson because he's from Helsingborg, so you're not supposed to like him. So I had to act like I didn't like Henrik Larsson, and everyone in Glasgow thinks that everyone in Sweden loves Henrik Larsson. So they would like scream Henrik Larsson, and the Malmö fans would boo.
Okay.
And then when we were going to the stadium where the away fans enters, there's a huge picture of Henrik Larsson, and all the Malmö fans were booing and stuff like that. And I was like taking a picture, but not discreetly, so no one had to see that I was taking a picture of Henrik Larsson. So that was a bit special, but it was really cool to actually get to go to Celtic Park and also see Malmö. They didn't win, but got really a good result, and then defeated Celtic at home and knocked them out. So that was kind of nice.
Yeah, it's no small feat. I mean, if you can go into Celtic Park and get a decent result and then end up eliminating them, I mean, they have a great home reputation. Not so much.
Yeah, we did lose. It was 3-2, but we had 2 away goals.
Yeah, that's a great
And
result.
I remember at the airport going back, there was one of the Malmö fans. He was going around singing this song that we always sing when Malmö have won, which is like, we won again, we won again. It was so easy, we won again. And then someone was telling him, we didn't win, right? He was like, but we almost won. No, we didn't almost win. It's like, yeah, but we won again. So it was like that feeling because it was a really good result, and then we knocked them out as well.
So is John Guidetti also a player that you like to follow, or do you have a hero in the current generation of the Swedish national team? Because obviously Sweden are going through a little bit of a transitional period. Did really well at the World Cup, but they are kind of a changing of the guard now with Zlatan retiring from international football, and it seems to have had a liberating effect on many of the players. But is there anyone in particular that you're very fond of right now in the Swedish national team?
Well, there are several players that I like, but it's no one that is like the level of Henrik Larsson or the way he was, or during that period when we had Henrik, we had Ljungberg, we had Zlatan coming up as well. That was like players on another level, I think. And but then the team, this team is more about the group than it is about specific players. And I think that this is probably the first team we had in quite a few years that hadn't had those really standout players, but quite a, not to say low level, but not the same high level of players. But it's a very, very good, strong group. But if there is one player I always like to highlight that I like a lot, it's Pontus Jansson, who plays for Leeds now, but is I think it's also because I'm a Malmö fan. He's the biggest Malmö fan you can find. So he came up through the Malmö youth teams and played for the first team. But before he played for the first team, he was a fan. So he would always be at every match, the away matches, the home matches, standing, singing, waving flags, doing all the fan things. And then suddenly he was on the pitch. And when he was on the pitch, as soon as the match was over, he would run to the fans. And when he went and started playing for Leeds, he didn't stop doing that. He would, as soon as there's a break in the schedule in the Premier League, he flies back to Malmö, stand with the fans. He goes to away matches with the fans. He's like any normal fan. And I have like one of my favorite Pontus Jansson moments was when Malmö won the league title a few years ago, and he was playing, and they were doing it away, and all the fans, I think there was like a few thousand Malmö fans who had traveled to the match, and they were invading the pitch, and all the players were running to the dressing rooms, as they always do when the fans invade the pitch to hide, except for Pontus Jansson. He was just running towards the fans. So that's a player. I love him because he's a really good player. He's a great defender. He's a hard worker, but he's basically a Malmö fan playing football as a professional player. But he's like a Malmö fan first, a professional player second. And I find that really amazing in these days as well, because it's very seldom you see.
It's very rare. Yeah, for sure. I mean, to see a player that's genuinely a fan of a club and that puts in so much, they just always put in more effort, it seems like. We had that a couple of years ago with Cenk Tosun, who was a born and raised Beşiktaş fan, and now playing for Everton, of course. And you could see it on the pitch for sure.
And a good story is also when Malmö played in Champions League against Juventus. He was currently playing for Torino. So when Malmö was playing away against Juventus, he opened up his home and let Malmö fans, he had like 20 Malmö fans staying at his apartment for the match. And he was just in the other room because he had to sleep because he had training the next day. And then he would go to the match and watch Malmö against Juventus with the Malmö fans as well. And when he was playing for Malmö, he changed his shirt number once. And then he told everyone who bought the Malmö shirt with the wrong number, let me know and I'll give you the new shirt with the right number. So that's just the guy he is. And he's just incredible, I think.
That's crazy. Crazy in a good way. So we already spoke quite a bit of Malmö here and your passion for the club. Did you grew up as a Malmö fan, I assume?
Yeah, I'm not from Malmö, but I'm from a small town here just outside of Malmö. So it's basically the only club, first division club we have there. So everyone is a Malmö supporter if you're into football. No one in my family was into football. They are now, though.
They kind of have to be.
They kind of had to be. But yeah, so I started to force my dad to go to Malmö matches. And then we went to one match where they were playing Landskrona, who's another team in the south, so it was a derby. And it was sold out, so we couldn't get a ticket, because normally we would just buy a ticket outside the stadium. And then he bought a ticket out of some guy who was selling it, but we only had one ticket. But if you were under 5 years old or something like that, you could get in for free. And I was like 10. So we pretended I was under 5.
Oh my god,
I don't know how that happened. Yeah, it worked. So I sat in my dad's lap and watched the match, and then after that he was like, okay, we're getting season tickets. And he's had season tickets ever since. He still has them and still goes to the matches now. So it's quite funny, because before that he didn't care about football at all.
It's a very recurring topic, I think, for many football fans, boys or girls. I think bonding with their fathers. For me, definitely a big part of why I got into football. So it's always a very, how should I put it, very, I lost the word, endearing, a very endearing, those types of stories are very endearing, always to me, especially. But let's talk a little bit about Malmö, the football club.
Yes.
It's, Malmö is known through Europe, I think, but for most people, like myself, who aren't huge on following the Swedish league, there's a couple of teams that Malmö, Göteborg, AIK from Stockholm, I believe they are.
Yeah.
But where would you say Malmö ranks in the historical all-time ranking of Swedish football, or at least post-World War II? would you say they're like top 3, top 2, top the biggest club in Sweden? Like, how does that go in your opinion?
I think they're definitely historically the best team in Swedish football. I think if we go a few years back, there was a discussion if it was Gothenburg or Malmö who was the best. But thanks to the recent history, I think Malmö has gone so far now that you can't really discuss it anymore. Historically, Malmö made it to the final of the European Cup in 1979, which is the best any Swedish team has ever done in Europe. Gothenburg fans will argue that, yeah, but we went further in the Champions League, and the Champions League is more difficult than what the European Cup was. However, they never made a final. So there's always that fight between Gothenburg and Malmö who made the biggest impact in Europe. But when it comes to the Swedish league, Malmö has won the league the most times. As I said, there was this debate between Gothenburg and Malmö because back in the day, the Swedish league worked in a different way. That first you had to win the league, and then when you won the league, you had to win the playoff, and then win the title through the playoff. And Gothenburg and Malmö would count those titles differently depending. Like, I think it was Malmö who counted it when you win the league, and Gothenburg counted when you win the playoff as winning the title. So they had this fight about who had the most league titles for quite a few years because they were counting it differently. But now, with Malmö winning the league several times in the last few years, and Gothenburg haven't even been close, Malmö kind of ran away in either way. How you either count, Malmö is still on top. So historically, when it comes to the titles, when it comes to everything, I think no one can anymore really say anything else than that Malmö is the best team historically in Swedish football.
That sounds a lot like the discussions in Turkey, because in Turkey they started counting since 1959, but because that's when officially the Turkish league got started, but there's so much that comes before 1959 that in the modern era now doesn't get counted anymore, even though it included all the big clubs, those competitions too. But anyway, that's neither here or there. So Malmö are the biggest club in Sweden, or for any Gothenburg fans or whatever that are listening, at least one of the biggest clubs in Sweden. But how did they manage to qualify for the Europa League last season?
So it's quite difficult for Swedish team to qualify for Europe. I think to qualify for the Champions League should be impossible, but Malmö have done it twice in the last few years, which I still don't really understand how the heck they managed to do that, because it's so many matches and so many layers, so to speak, you have to go through. Because first you have to win. Well, basically, if you win the Swedish league, you get to do Champions League qualifiers. If you got second or third, you get to do Europa League qualifiers. Malmö won the league last year. I can also say that the Swedish league have another time frame than other European leagues. So we start the league in March or April, and then it's finished in November. So it's played by year and not over 2 different years, so to speak. And Malmö won last year the league, so they did Champions League qualifiers this season. And there was 3. First they played against Drita. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, from Kosovo. Won quite easily both away and home. And then it was Cluj from Romania. Still don't know if I pronounce it correctly. Won away.
Cluj, but I don't know. I'm not a specialist either.
I have no idea with these names. So won away, drew at home, so not as comfortable, but got through. And then the last one that we played in the Champions League qualifiers was against Molvidi from Hungary. And I think Malmö should have won that match because that was not really a good opponent, but Malmö played horribly. So they drew at home 1-1, drew away 0-0, and was knocked out of the Champions League on away goals. But when you get to that stage, if you get knocked out, you get into the last round of the Europa League qualifiers. To reach the Champions League, they would have to go one more qualifier match, and then they would reach the Champions League. So it's like 4 either way. So it's a very, very long process to make it all the way. And then they got Midtjylland in the last Europa League qualifying stage, which is a Danish side. And it looked very promising in the first match because we were leading 2-0 after the first half. And then just dropped everything in the second half. And it ended 2-2 at home. So going into the second leg in Denmark, I was quite worried. I think a lot of people was quite worried that we would actually miss Europe, but they won it 2-0 away. And that's how Malmö made it to the Europa League for this season.
A Danish-Swedish derby, so to speak.
And quite a fun thing, actually. I have some Danish friends who wrote to me. It's like, why are Malmö playing with Danish flags on their shirts? Because at the back of the shirt, Malmö have a flag, which is actually the flag of Scania, the south of Sweden. And it's red with a yellow cross in the middle. But on my friend's TV, it looked like it was white. And the Malmö has so many Danish players, so she was like, okay, so that guy's Danish, so that's why he has put a Danish flag on his shirt for some reason. And that guy too, but Malmö can't have that many Danish guys. Why do everyone have a Danish flag? But it was just, it was the Scania flag.
It's funny because I have a Danish and a Swedish friend, and I remember one time my Danish friend was telling me a story about that there was still a law in Denmark that said if any Swede comes over the ice, you can hit him with a bat or something like that. That's like literally in the law in Denmark apparently. For when what's it called? I think it's Kattegat, right? The lake. I think when it freezes over or something. Apparently in the medieval ages or something, people would come over the ice. Or something like that, but that's totally not relevant to football, of course. But you got to the Europa League, and what's the furthest that Malmö have ever gotten before in the Europa League? Do you know?
In the Europa League, well, I think they've never played in the Europa League. They played in the UEFA Cup, I think. I don't know. I know that.
Oh, is this the first time they're in the Europa League group stages?
I do. I'm not 100%, but I think so because. The last time, and I'm not even sure if they played in the. I know that when they reached the Champions League for the first time now in recent years, it was the first time in history they reached the Champions League when they played it. It was the Europa Cup, and in Europa League, no, I do not think they've ever been in the group stages of the Europa League. They played qualifications for the Europa League. But because they've been winning since it became the Europa League, so to speak, they've been winning the Swedish league so many times that they've been mostly in the Champions League qualifiers and then failed in the Champions League qualifiers, so they never reached the Europa League qualifiers. So no, I don't think they've been in the group stages of Europa League before.
It's kind of baffling, really, if you think about it, that the champion of Sweden is only making one of their first appearances in the Europa League. So how are they doing in the current season? Because you already mentioned that it's very difficult it's very special in Sweden and in Norway, and I don't know if it's the same in Denmark, but basically you're playing these qualifiers when you're already halfway through the next season. So how are Malmö doing in the current campaign? How are they looking for the championship right now?
They're looking quite good now. They looked really bad before. So we have to, like last season, they won the league, but it looked horrible. I have still no idea how they managed to win the Swedish league last season because they played so bad football. They had basically like from 2010 until the last coach that I'm going to speak about soon, they had this change where Malmö was starting to play more European football, you can say, they started to. I think that's why they managed to get out in the Champions League, why they managed to start winning the league in a way that you normally don't do in Sweden, because it's not very common for a team to win the Swedish league 2 years in a row, because it's very difficult, because when you win the league, you lose all your players to teams in Europe. But what Malmö did in 2010 was that they won the league with a team that was so young that they didn't lose all their players. And then since then, and when they started to go out in the Champions League and get all the money from there, they've just become really, really, really dominant in the Swedish league that we haven't really had any team being that dominant for a long, long time. But what happened was they got this new coach, Magnus Persson, who is a Swedish coach, and he has started backtracking the way that they, in my opinion, the way that they had developed into becoming more and more of a European, more technical team to become more and more Swedish again, which is more football, more running, more physical, and it didn't really suit the players, I think. So last season, I thought they were playing really, really badly. They still managed somehow to win the league. This season, they started with the same coach, and it started the same way and looked really bad. And he was eventually fired in May. And when he was fired, Malmö was 10th in the league table, which is basically like Barcelona or Real Madrid would be 10th in La Liga. So it's completely unacceptable in any way. Then the sporting director took over as caretaker for the team until June, and nothing really changed. So they were still 10th when the current coach, German, Uwe Rössler, took over, and it's just been a complete change since he came in. They are currently 4th in the table, and I also looked up that if you took and looked the points from when he took over until today and you made a league table of that period of time, then Malmö would be 2nd in the table. So that's a huge change then from being 10th. So right now I think they're starting to coming back to becoming Malmö again and being what we expect Malmö FF to do in these matches. But the start of the season was horrible. But they are still quite far behind the AIK, as you say in English, who are leading the league at the moment. So they have a bit to catch up to do, but it's starting to look quite good again.
So you already spoke a little bit about Uwe Rössler, but what can you tell us about just the Malmö coach? What type of a coach is he? What's his footballing philosophy? What type of football does he like his team to play? And has he been able to get that across to his players?
Well, he's a guy who he wants his team to have the initiative. He wants them to have the ball, to be offensive, to be attacking. He doesn't like, he would never let his team to defend for 70, 80 minutes and wait for the opponent to make a mistake. He wants to provoke the mistakes from them. And he wants his players to work hard, run a lot. And I think he really got that through to this team. It's a complete different team since the first part of the season. And he also likes young players. It's like his philosophy in general is to be offensive, attacking, aggressive, and basically that. And he also likes rotations a lot. Like in the system, when he came to Malmö, he said that he prefers to have a team where you can have 3 attacking players that can switch positions with each other. But looking at the Malmö squad, he said, but here I have a 4-4-2 squad. So that's what I'm going to play. And that basically is what he started out playing with and what he's been playing with in Europe. So I think that's what he's going to have in the Europa League. But in the Swedish League, he's been rotating the system a bit and been playing 3-5-2 at some times. So he likes to change and do some rotations here and there and not be too predictable.
Let's talk a little bit about the players, because this is kind of a funny coincidence, but of course a couple of years ago, well, it's been quite a while, when Beşiktaş and Malmö met each other the last time, it must be like 10 years ago, Matthias Asper was playing there, the goalkeeper, and he played briefly at Beşiktaş. So we knew him, he was a familiar face, of course. But now, in the current Malmö squad, the goalkeeper, Johan Dalin, also has a little bit of a Turkish history. He's 32 years old. I think he must be the oldest player in the team right now. But he played...
Marcus Rosenberg is older.
Oh, okay, sorry. But Dalin basically had a very short stint in Turkey too, with Gençler, so there's a little bit of a familiar face for people listening to the podcast that follow the Super League, obviously. So that's just a funny little coincidence that I felt there was due to the goalkeepers both having had Turkish Turkish background when when Beşiktaş and Malmö met before. But who would you say are the key players in this team? Is Johan Dalin an important player in your opinion? Is he a leader or something like that?
I definitely think he's an important player. He played in Malmö before as well, and I remember when he left, it was a big hole to lose him, because he's a very, very good goalkeeper. He's also had some stints with the national teams at times, and we had we have had so many goalkeepers lately that have been very good, so I'm mixing them up. But anyway, when he came back, it was very important to get in. We had just lost a goalkeeper that had been very important for us. So to get in a good goalkeeper again was very important, and I think he's always been brilliant when he's been playing for Malmö, and he's a very very liked player by the fans as well. So he's for sure a key player.
Yeah, I liked him against Cherbourg too. I didn't really understand why his stint there was so short. Perhaps he couldn't settle in Turkey or something. Because I thought it was a very good goalkeeper, and now they, of course, they had the last 2 years they had Johannes Hoff, who was also a Swedish goalkeeper. And I remember when he first came to Turkey, I spoke to someone about him in Sweden, and he said, he's not that great. And in Turkey, Johannes Hoff has been amazing. Yeah, this just goes to show you that sometimes the environment causes a player to thrive, and I'm sure that's the case with Johan Dahlin. But who else would you point to that Beşiktaş gang and Salzburg should watch out for when they're playing Malmö?
So there's definitely two players that I would say more than anyone, and the first one is most likely our oldest player. I can't imagine anyone being older, which is Marcus Rosenberg. He's 35 now, who also is a Malmö youth product from the start. I remember he used to play with Zlatan in the youth teams of Malmö. He was a right back then, but is now a forward, and he came up for Malmö, and they sent him on loan to Halmstad. This was in 2004. And just because he was a young player, to let him get some playing time for a mid-table team. But what he did was that he basically almost made Halmstad win the league title before Malmö. He was the top scorer of the season, and it ended up on the last match day. It was decided if Halmstad or Malmö would win the title, and Malmö ended up winning it. So otherwise, I think Malmö fans would have been a bit angry at him. But then he came back, played half a season with Malmö, and was like a wonder kid. Went to Ajax, just as Zlatan, kind of followed his footsteps in the start, and I think people had big expectations on him. It didn't really take off as Zlatan did, but he did have some really good seasons in Werder Bremen. Then he went to play for Racing Santander in La Liga. He went to West Bromwich in the Premier League. So he had a good European stint, and then he returned to Malmö. And I think that anyone you ask in Sweden would probably agree with that. He's probably the player who's had a good European football career and then returned home, who had the most impact on his childhood club when he came home, because he's been so important for Malmö since he came back. Normally people have this high expectation on these type of players when they've been out in Europe, they've been doing well, and then they're coming home to kind of play the last few seasons of their career at home in their childhood club. And they never really live up to those big expectations, because the expectations are normally too high for the level that they can play on when they are at that age. But he's just exceeded the expectations since he got back. He's the captain of Malmö now, and he's been the key, I think, for making this team go out and play in Europe, for keeping the domination that they have been doing. The team changed, the players changed more or less from season to season, because that's just how it works in Sweden. Because if you're successful, then the players will go out to European clubs and be sold off. So it's been a lot of different teams since he came back, but he's always been the nail in the entire team, and been very important for the younger players. And also with his experience. I think also that if you ask supporters of other clubs in Sweden, they hate him because he plays rough. He's good, but he can be a bit ugly in his playing style as well sometimes. And he's just for anyone who support his team, you love him. If you don't support his team, you hate him, kind of thing. I do think this is going to be his last season, probably before retiring. Because he's really getting till the end of it, but he's still so important, and especially when it comes to these big matches and these European nights, that's where he shows his experience more than ever, and he will score those goals that when you really need them as well. So that's for sure the biggest key player when you speak about Malmö FF. The second player that I would like to highlight would be a Danish guy, which is Anders Christiansen, who played for Malmö and was one of our best players. And then he was sold to go to Genk, which is quite interesting as we're now playing against them in the Europa League. And he, I don't really know how he went there, but
that was
I
Ghent.
think
That was Ghent.
Really?
Yes, that's a different club, but that's not. That's
thought
not.
it was Genk.
No, it was Ghent. But it's not
Anyway.
uncommon for people to confuse those because they have the
Yeah.
same colors and almost the same name. So yeah.
Well, either way, he didn't do very well.
No, yeah.
So he got back to Malmö after 6 months, and now he's just been. When we changed the coach and with him coming back, that's been the two big changes in why Malmö are playing good now compared to before. So he's like a real probably if Rosenberg is the key player when it comes to being the captain of the side, to just pushing the youth players to making them all of these things, then Anders Christiansen is when it comes to the football in the midfield. He's the one who's running the team, so to speak. So that's the two main players for sure for Malmö FF.
Yeah, I actually remember watching him in the beginning, and I thought he was actually a quality player. So I was surprised that because I don't follow Ghent that closely, but I was surprised that he went back so quickly after just 2 seasons. But yeah, for example, I think Marcus Rosenberg is definitely a player people are going to remember. And of course, for Turkish fans, Johan Dalin might be a name they'll remember, but Rosenberg for sure. The name that most people will remember. And I didn't actually realize he was already this old, because I remember seeing him at Ajax back in the day, and he was, like you said, there was a lot of hope for him to be the new Zlatan, but he wasn't. Didn't really score that many goals, but he if you look at his career, he scored his goals everywhere, but he never really he was never a top scorer type of striker, I guess, outside of Sweden. But that's an interesting cocktail, what we can see from young players with a bit of experience there with Marcus Rosenberg and with Dalin and some other guys. When we look, for example, at Genk this season, or one of our opponents in the Europa League as well, they have a very young team with not a lot of experience at all. They had Thomas Buffel for many years, and he was like 36. He was still with them when they went to the quarterfinals 2 years ago, but they let him go this summer. So they really have a lack of experience at that level. But their parkour in Europe this season wouldn't suggest that, as they have been impressive. So let's talk a little bit about that draw. I already alluded to it a little bit, but from pot 1, Beşiktaş, from pot 2, Racing Gang, from pot 3, Malmö, and then from pot 4, Sarpsborg, a Scandinavian derby for Malmö, with the Norwegian opponent that are making their European debut. So, what do you think is Malmö's mindset headed into this Europa League? What are their goals? What are their expectations? And what could be considered, from their perspective, a success or a failure?
Well, Malmö is there's this special mentality when it comes to Malmö FF, and I think a bit of Malmö people in general, which is very un-Swedish in a way, because it's that they are always the best, and they're always going to win, and that's, I think, also why they managed to do some impressive things in Europe, because they are not afraid of going out against Real Madrid or going out against Atletico Madrid or Juventus, or these big clubs that they've been playing, because when they go out, they generally believe, I don't really know how they manage to do this, but they generally believe that they are better, which everyone knows they are not. And I think that's the mentality they are going to go out to with in the Europa League as well. I remember the home fans and the support at home, especially in the home matches, is going to be more evident than in the away matches, because the atmosphere at Malmö Stadium when they play in Europe at home is something completely else. And I remember when they played against Rangers in a Champions League qualifier in 2010, one of the Malmö players back then, Yiloano Hamad, he said that when they were in the dressing room, they were like all thinking like, shit, we're playing Rangers. This is gonna be difficult. This is like a big European club, big Scottish club with a rich history. And then as soon as they went out to the pitch and they were surrounded by the home support, he said that his mindset and all the players' mindset basically has changed in the blink of a second to who the fuck are Rangers? We're Malmö, we're like the best team in the world. This is going to be easy. And then they just had a play day with him, more or less. And that's how Malmö has always been from back when they reached the European Cup final in 1979, when they were asking anyone in Sweden. Everyone in Sweden were like shocked and surprised, like, shit, Malmö are in the semi-finals. Oh shit, Malmö are in the finals. But if you ask the Malmö players, anyone in Malmö, they would be like, yeah, of course we are. Where else should we be? And it's been the same attitude now when they've been in Europe, when they were playing Salzburg, and where they won against Salzburg, and that's when they reached the Champions League for the first time. I think if you listen to the Swedish commentators, if you listen to the Swedish media and other Swedish people, everyone were like, okay, Malmö will have no chance against Salzburg. This is going to be... it was fun as long as it lasted, to feel that we might have a Swedish team in the Champions League, but it's not going to happen. And then when Malmö won, everyone was like, whoa, what did just happen? And then you had this, one of the old Malmö players, Stefan Tapper, who was one of the guys in the European Cup final in 79, was in the studio with these commentators who were always like going crazy. And they asked him like what was the reaction from the Malmö team when they got Salzburg? And he was just standing there like, nothing, like, okay, that's Salzburg, we're Malmö, we're going to win. And that's basically how Malmö FF are. And what the players learn as soon as they come to the club is that this winner mentality, that it doesn't matter who is on the other side of the pitch, that we're always going to win, we're always going to be the best, and anything else is a disappointment. So I think in that sense, they're going to go out to every match expecting to win and having that mindset. But I think there has to be some realism as well. And in that sense, qualifying from the group will be a real success, and everyone will be happy with that. I think if they fail to qualify from the group, there will probably be some disappointment in the squad and in the team. But in the general view, if you look in from outside, and it's like being the third in that group should be okay. Being lost in the group will be a disappointment for sure, but going through from the group, it would be exceeding expectations, I would say.
So what are your personal expectations then? Do you think they have a good chance of going through? And at whose expense would you see it being?
I think it will be difficult. I think they will probably end third in the group. I would be disappointed if they got lost. But quite surprised actually if they managed to go through the group. I think it will be down very much to the matches at home, which is where Malmö is strong. I think they will have a difficult time in the away matches because they don't have that support that brings them to a level that they normally don't reach. So I think it will be very difficult for them to go through. But if they would go through it, I would probably say it would be on Genk's behalf. But I think it's difficult. I think it's going to be really, really difficult for them.
Okay, so let's end in with this segment with what your prediction is for the table in this group. Who will finish first, second, third, fourth?
Yeah, I'm going to be quite boring here and just like go with the pots, because I think that is how it feels like it's going to end. But it's football, so it can go either way. But I would say Beşiktaş, Genk, Malmö, and then the Norwegian guys.
So is that a match that is being looked forward to? The derby against Salzburg? I mean, it's not really a derby, but you know, in terms of countries, it kind of is a derby. So is that something that's being looked forward to in Sweden at all?
Nah, I don't really think so.
I think it's probably more for Salzburg, perhaps. Yeah. No, I think Swedes aren't that excited about playing Norwegian or Danish teams. It's more fun to get to play European teams, so to speak, not just the Scandinavians. And I think that when it's Danish teams, it's a bit more exciting because it's closer. Mm-hmm. And Malmö fans, then there's always going to be a lot of Malmö fans on away matches, especially in Europe.
But like if it's in Denmark, then it's going to be a fight to get tickets, more or less, and it becomes more exciting that way. And if what would be a derby more would be if they would play Copenhagen, then there is real feelings. But that's just like over the bridge.
Malmö's in the south and Copenhagen's in the north of Denmark, right?
Yeah, it's a 15-minute drive over the bridge between Copenhagen and Malmö.
So that's really a derby then.
So it's as close as you can get for a derby, and they never really play each other. But they do sometimes like friendlies, and those friendlies are never friendlies.
So what's the feeling like in Sweden when the draw happens? Is there like the matches against Genk, Beşiktaş? Is that something that's being looked forward to, or those looked at as big games? Or are they perhaps, because in Belgium they kind of had this feeling of disappointment that they didn't draw an English team or something, because that's something that often comes back in Belgium. They always seemingly want to play English clubs. I don't know why that is, but I spoke about it with Guillaume in our coverage of Genk, and he said, well, for Brugge a couple of years ago, they always want to go back to that Liverpool final from 1978. So they're always hoping they draw Liverpool. So I get that, but even with other Belgian clubs, it was kind of the reaction to the draw was like, we didn't get really the best in terms of selling tickets and stuff like that, like the best opponents, the most attractive opponents. Obviously, there's a large Turkish population in Genk, so even though away fans are banned, I have no doubt that the stadium will be sold out, even among the home crowd. So I hope nothing will happen there. But what's the feeling like in Sweden generally with this draw?
Well, I remember when we were in the Champions League and we had Real Madrid and we had PSG and then we had Juventus and Atletico over the 2 different seasons, and there was a big debate going on in Sweden because I think the rest of Sweden wanted Malmö to get those draws because then you can go and see your team that you support outside of Sweden, these big clubs and all that excitement. But if you ask the Malmö fans, they want as easy of a draw as possible. They want to be able to go far. So they are not very happy with getting the difficult clubs. So I think this draw is probably something medium. It's maybe not the most attractive because you don't have the big clubs that will attract a lot of people to go and buy tickets. But at the same time, you don't have the super easy teams either. So it's like something in between. I do remember when Malmö was playing Real Madrid, there was also a lot of anger among the Malmö fans because a lot of people who normally would not go to Malmö matches would try to get tickets and then to support Real Madrid, and then the real Malmö fans would not get tickets because we don't have a very big stadium. It's big enough for the Swedish league, but when we play in Europe, it's always full.
Isn't it like 24,000 or something? It's pretty big.
But not for Malmö when they play in Europe. It's always full, and it's always like almost impossible to get tickets when it's against the big teams.
But don't the season ticket holders get like first dibs, so to speak?
Yeah, but if you're not a season ticket holder, so like for instance, we have 2 season tickets because we normally like have those passing in the family who can go uses the tickets. So then if it's a European match, maybe everyone wants to go, and then we only have 2, are only able to buy 2 tickets, and then we have to be in line for the rest.
Oh really? You don't get like for example in Belgium, if you have a season ticket, you can buy up to 4 tickets?
No, it's 2 tickets because we have 2. So I remember when we were playing Celtic, we had this like fight at home who was gonna go. I ended up getting a press accreditation, so my sister got happy because then she could go.
That's great.
But yeah, so I remember when like the match against PSG and Real Madrid, there was a bit of, you could say, a problem because you didn't get the same atmosphere at the home stadium that you normally get, where everyone supports Malmö, because it became too many people who are not really Malmö fans had bought tickets to support Real Madrid or to support PSG.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate.
It kind of lost that magic, and that magic is very important for how Malmö plays at home in Europe. So those 2 matches, I would say Malmö did not reach the same level that they did against Atletico Madrid or that they did against Juventus, where with thanks to the fans. So in that sense, I think Malmö fans are happy when they do not get the big teams, because then they can create that atmosphere in another way.
You know, you should float this idea because it's a very easy solution, really. You should have a fan card that they implement, and people with a fan card get without needing, like, they still get, like, you know, for example, season ticket holders get, like, the tickets go on sale a week earlier, and then people with a fan card, which is free, but you have to have it already, it goes on sale 3 days earlier or something, so that the randoms can only buy it as the last resort. So people with a Malmö fan card then can get first dibs, and that way you avoid having PSG or Real Madrid fans in the stadium.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's an understandable thing. You know, if you look at the draw beforehand, AC Milan was in pot 2, Arsenal and Chelsea in pot 1. You know, obviously for Belgian clubs, for Swedish clubs, I think playing for anyone, I mean, playing against AC Milan is a bigger deal than playing against Genk. Playing against Arsenal or Chelsea, unfortunately for Beşiktaş fans, it's a bigger deal for other clubs. You know, especially for Scandinavian clubs where so many people support an English club. So it's completely understandable, because I know some of our fans were like, "Hey, what are these guys talking about? Like, seriously, you think you can do better? This is the Europa League." But I mean, yeah, Chelsea, Arsenal, and on paper at least, I think.
And it might not be that they are better teams at the moment. It's just that they are bigger clubs. They have bigger supports in Sweden, for instance.
I don't know about that. I think there's a lot of Turks in Sweden, aren't there?
There are. But like English football in Sweden.
Yeah, for sure. The Premier League is huge there, so it's very.
It's like almost bigger than the Swedish league, or it probably is bigger than the Swedish league.
So it's very special, even that you don't even support an English club. You're a Liga fan, so that's very uncharacteristic for a Swede.
I'm not like the normal Swede.
So I think we covered basically everything, but you told me before, and I haven't heard this yet, so it's going to be my first time hearing it too, but you told me before we started recording that you have a very special anecdote in regards to Malmö, Beşiktaş, and I don't know what the third point was, but you definitely have a special story to tell, so please let us hear it.
Yeah, well, it's not that super special, but basically my first memory of Malmö playing in Europe was when 2005, which was they won the league for the first time in 2004 in 16 years. So during my lifetime, they hadn't been close to being out in Europe before that, really.
You're making me feel super old now. I thought that match was like in 2010 or something.
It's in 2005.
But I remember it because I remember the match very vividly because Matthias Asper was Malmö's goalkeeper at the time.
And so I have, but this match, I don't remember the match itself that much. I remember that Beşiktaş was in black and white. I don't remember that it was Beşiktaş. I had to look this up beforehand. I just remember it was a Turkish club. They were in black and white. And Malmö was playing in Europe, and because it was Europe, we didn't have a normal season ticket seats in the stadium, so we were sitting at another spot, and there was the Turkish fans were above me. And during the match, some of them poured beer down, so I got beer all over me. And that's my first memory of Malmö playing in Europe. And I remember that I didn't want Malmö to play in Europe again because it was not fun.
That is totally not what I expected to hear. That is so. And how old were you back then?
I was like 12 or something.
Oh my god. Okay, people.
Beer all over me.
Going to European away games, don't act like bleeps, you know.
But I always remember that it was a Turkish club, it was black and white, and that I got beer over me, and then I didn't remember what club it was, and I had to look it up before doing this podcast, and I was like, oh, it was Beşiktaş.
I don't really understand why they would ever put away fans in a section above home fans. I think that's the dumbest thing, because they did it in Lyon too. I don't get that. It's so dumb. You should always put them like in a little corner, you know, the bottom little corner in the side of the stadium where they can't bother anyone. That's where you put the away fans.
we do that now. It was in the old stadium.
So you learned.
Yeah, we've learned.
Well, on behalf of all Beşiktaş fans, I would like to genuinely apologize for that, because that is not those are not the values of the club. But unfortunately, sometimes we have, especially in the European away games, some of our fans, they tend to get drunk or whatever and act a little bit like animals. But I hope that your future experiences with Beşiktaş are going to be a lot more positive.
I'm sure they are. I'm sure.
So let's end this episode about Malmö, and let's talk about you again. Do you have anything to plug? Like anything special? For example, any project you're working on? Something exciting coming up?
Am I doing anything?
Like a book, maybe?
Like a book? Yeah, I'm working on a book. It's no idea when it's going to come out. I hope maybe in a year or so I will more or less have it done. This is a book about Real Oviedo, and that's a very long story to explain why it's a book about Real Oviedo, because their story is very complex, which is why I'm writing a book about it.
Give it to us in a nutshell. What's the passion? What's this connection with Real Oviedo?
It's a very unique story because it's a club that used to be a historic La Liga club. And then in 2001, they were relegated to the second division, tried their best to get back to the first division, failed, got into a lot of debt, couldn't pay their players. They were relegated on the pitch to the third division, forced relegated to the fourth division of Spanish football, which is basically amateur football, because they couldn't pay their players. And the club should more or less have gone bankrupt and disappeared. But the fans refused to let that happen. So the fans started volunteering for the club. You had youth players would be playing, and they wouldn't know, like, from the next match day to the other if the team would exist or the club would exist for the next match. They would go and play away matches against these small neighborhood clubs in, like, pitches that didn't even have a stand, and they would have, like, thousands of fans traveling to these matches supporting them. So it's like this really, really crazy story. They didn't afford electricity or warm water at the training ground. And during this time, they had Juan Mata playing for the youth teams. They had Santi Cazorla playing in the youth teams. And they had Micho playing in the youth teams. And Micho was one of the players who started playing with the first team during this period. So everyone basically thought this club would go under. Everyone lost hope in them, the city, the politicians, everyone except for the fans who kept on fighting. And there's a lot of layers to it to make it even more complex and even more interesting that I will not go into now. But basically, they managed to, little by little, keep the club alive, and they managed to go back to the third division of Spanish football. And then in 2012, it didn't go further. They just realized that we can't keep on like this, that we can't keep the club running like this. So they had to do something drastic to save the club. And I think most of the people who before had been quite naive or positive that we can actually save the club started to realize that it's over. But what they did was that they started selling shares so that anyone could go and buy a share in the club for 10 euros. And every day there would be a huge line outside of the stadium to buy shares. And this would go on for months. But even with every single person in this small town that is Oviedo buying shares, it wouldn't be enough to save the club. And they started to realize that. So they asked, one of the guys asked Sid Lowe, who is a British journalist who covers Spanish football, who did Erasmus, studied in Oviedo when he was younger, so he has a connection with the club. They asked him if he had any idea how they could make people from outside Oviedo more internationally buying shares in the club. And he wrote a tweet that basically said, the club that gave the Premier League Micho, Cazorla and Mata is on the threat of going out of business. Please buy shares. And this was in 2012, so this was when Micho was having his fantastic season with Swansea. Juan Mata was at Chelsea, Cazorla was with Arsenal, and they were all having brilliant seasons. And that tweet just exploded it. And it became world news all over the world. They were writing about it in the New York Times. They were speaking about it at CNN, BBC, everywhere. And people from all over the world started to buy shares in this small third division club in northern Spain. And today, I think there's like 2 or 3 countries in the world that does not have shareholders, Real Oviedo shareholders. There is basically people all over the world who is a shareholder in this club. And that then on the last day of the share issue, the at the time richest man in the world, Carlos Slim, bought shares in the club as well. So that saved the club. The world kind of saved this club. And now they are in the 2nd division. They are trying to reach La Liga. They were one disallowed goal away from reaching the playoffs for La Liga last season, and they are with no debts at all. So it's a really intriguing story, and it's a story about the people more than the football, I would say. But so that was me trying to make it as short as possible to explain what it is about.
It's kind of the anti-football capitalism story, if you think about it. It's people coming together to bail out a club. Whereas in modern football, we see these huge oil magnates and businessmen, whatever, buy clubs, and the clubs lose their identity and all that stuff. And this is the opposite, really. This is just a bunch of socios, really. It's a great story. I really look forward to that book. I would love to read it, and I'm sure that you've sparked a lot of people's interest with that nutshell story. Alexandra, where can people follow you? Where can they find you on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever you want to share?
You can find me on Twitter at Alexandra Jonson, and that's Johnson with no H and only one S. And the same is on Instagram. I also do have another Instagram that's called Alex Corner, which is where I only post football pictures, and not as often as I post stuff on my personal accounts. But you can follow either one, which one people like, depending on what they want to see. It's a lot of football on both accounts, though, because that's my life. And then I'm also, could also pitch that I'm also working with La Liga Lowdown, which is, you could say, a hub for Spanish football in English on the internet. So we're on Twitter at La Liga Lowdown. We're on YouTube at La Liga Lowdown. I will also have a mini podcast where we round up the La Liga round every weekend. And on our YouTube channel, we are mainly doing interviews with different La Liga players and coaches and La Liga people, mostly in English. When they are not in English, we have subtitles in English. And we also do different kind of video content, and we tweet a lot. So anything you want to know about La Liga and Spanish football, you can find there as well.
Well, Alexandra, thank you very much for giving us the lowdown on Malmö and telling us so many fun stories. It was a pleasure having you on, and hopefully we can speak again in the future, maybe after the Europa League is over, to have a little bit of a review of the group stages or something. I'm not 100% sure yet if we're going to do something like that, but I'm definitely going to hit you up again if we ever need any information on Malmö, on Swedish football in general, or perhaps even Spanish football, since you're quite familiar with that as well. So thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening to this special Europa League preview once again from Malmö FF. And please do listen to our other episodes on Sarpsborg and Genk. These will all drop around the same time, I think. So let's go Beşiktaş and let's go Malmö and Genk and Sarpsborg. All the best to all the clubs, of course. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, very nice. Great. So, as always, thank you so much to Alexandra Jonson. And, of course, thank you so much to Kaan as well for, as always, procuring top-notch, informed guests to let us know about everything we need to know about our opposition. So, yes, fantastic interview, very informative, very good stuff there. Now, of course, it would be the height of irresponsibility for me not to plug our esteemed guest, Alexandra. She can be found on Twitter, of course, at Alexandra Jonson. Very simple. Alexandra is Alexandra, Jonson, Jonson, no space, just her name. Very straightforward, very simple. And of course, you know, she's posting by and large about La Liga. But I think, you know, like most of us on football Twitter, we've all got something to say about just about anything that comes our way. So certainly give her a follow. Check that out. And now, typically I would be doing our usual, exit strategy here and just be telling you guys to follow us on Twitter at Eagles_podcast and follow me or Kaan or our guest who I just plugged on Twitter. But today we're returning to our hashtag after the beep formula, and I'm very pleased to say that because, of course, in these last couple weeks things have been somewhat frantic, lots of matches. Organizing with Kaan is sort of on the fly because we have, we've gotten a couple entries for after the beep, but we haven't really, been able to plug them in. But anyway, coming back to it, and today we're doing it because our original, now some of you may recall, we announced these Europa League preview episodes a long time ago, and in doing so, we actually announced a different person for this Malmö episode, a different Swede expert, if you will. And the Swede expert who we promised was another woman by the name of Johanna Franden. Now, Johanna is also a fairly prominent member of the Swedish footballing, punditry community, or whatever you call it. She works for Sportbladet in Sweden, a pretty well-known Swedish outlet. Her Twitter follow is at JohannaFranden, also JohannaFranden. And yeah, follow her there. But yes, she will be appearing on our hashtag after the beep. Sadly, she couldn't quite rearrange her schedule at the time to do the main part of this episode, but I think that's fine. We got a great guest in Alexandra Jonson in her stead. Thanks again to Sonia Nikchevich. But so yeah, Johanna did come through in the end regardless, and she's going to appear on our After the Beep, and she also has quite a bit to add to this conversation, R.E. Malmö. So get back into the habit of checking that out, sticking around after the end of the theme song for our hashtag After the Beep. And so without further ado, I will just move along, and I'll cue in the theme song on that note with my parting bit of wisdom for all of us, which, as always, is go Beşiktaş. Now, don't do anything. Don't hit the stop button now. I know you're used to hitting stop after you've heard that little bit of wisdom from me. After you've heard that spark of insight from me. But, yeah. Stick around for the after the beat. We've got a good one, folks. JohannaFranden.
Hello guys, hope you're doing well and that you're as excited as I am about this season and this group of Malmö, of course, coming from the Swedish perspective. I think it's manageable, for the Swedes. It's obviously not the toughest group of all. It's especially against Sarpsborg, Norway, that they will have to win. And I think that even the Belgians of Genk is feasible for Malmö. So I think that's their chance, basically doing, a good few games against those two teams. And then just relying perhaps on the fact that they used to be big in Europe. Now, Malmö is obviously not having a very good season in Sweden this year. They won't win the Swedish Allsvenska, the league. But they have done, in the previous years, and with experience as well from the Champions League and money, of course, from the European leagues, they are in a very good position to be a domineering sort of force in the coming 5 or even 10 years of Swedish football. So they are a little bit the team of the Swedes. Lots of people are going to be behind them because they are the only Swedish representative in Europe. And I think the Champions League adventure a couple of years ago was fun, obviously. Going to Paris and going to Madrid and, getting the hell beaten out of them. This is a lot more realistic for Malmö, and it's going to be a lot more, I think, exciting for most of the players, because it's really it's a tough group, but they could do it. That's how I feel, and I think that's what lots of supporters and players feel as well. So let's just give it a go and hope they can do it. And if not, there will be a new try, I think, next year, because Malmö in Europe, at least in Europa League, I think they are here to stay.
Beşiktaş International hopes you enjoyed this program.